Guys, welcome to another episode of the Basecamp Country Podcast. My name is Kix Nelson. Excited about this show. We have co-host with us, Tom James. Tom, how you doing, sir?
Doing well, guys. Good to see you both. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Tom, I want you to introduce our guest today. You know him a little bit better than I do, and I want you to tell us who we got on here today with us. This episode is brought to you by Basecamp Country Real Estate. If you've ever dreamed of owning your own piece of the great outdoors, now's the time to make it happen. Basecamp Country specializes in buying and selling hunting land, farms, and ranches, and we understand the land and the people who love it. At Basecamp Country, it's more than just dirt, it's a lifestyle. We are land professionals, outdoorsmen and women who know what it's like to walk the woods and work the land and chase big dreams. Whether you're selling property or looking for your own getaway spot, we are here to guide you every step of the way. And hey, if you're looking for more than just land, ever thought about a new career? Basecamp Country is hiring new and experienced agents across the country. So if you're passionate about the outdoors and want to build a lifelong dream of doing what you love, we've got the tools and training to help you succeed. So whether you're buying or selling real estate or starting something new, like a new career, head on over to basecampcountry.com and see how we can help you. And remember, here at Basecamp Country, it's more than just dirt, it's a lifestyle.
Absolutely. This is Kevin Buetow. Kevin and I have been friends for just a very short while. But, you know, oftentimes in life, you run across somebody that you meet, and it doesn't take you very long to feel like you've known each other forever and you've got a lot in common. And it's this exact scenario with Kevin. He actually reached out to me via our local QDMA NDA National Deer Association chapter. Said he had recently joined the NDA and he was excited to get plugged into the local chapter. We're a little bit, maybe 45 minutes to an hour, sort of northeast of where Kevin lives in Martinsville, Indiana. But I mentioned that, hey, we're always looking for great new members and people that want to get involved and help do, spread the message and participate in our events. I told him that we do a banquet every other year, and then the years in between, we do a field day. We just had a banquet last summer, so this year's project will be a big field day event at a location yet to be determined in August. And a couple other back and forth conversations. Kevin said, well, what kind of help do you guys need outside of that? And I said, well, I'm the only guy that kind of runs our chapter Facebook page. And, I could tell that kind of piqued his interest a little bit because he said, what kind of help do you need? And I said, maybe just content, just another contributor as an administrator and help keep that page fresh and sharing the message of the NDA. One thing led to another. We spent a lot of time on the phone and I learned a whole lot about him. And the very first thing I said to him when I reached out to him initially in response was, thank you for your service. He mentioned that he was in the military, that he had served in the Marines, and that always means a lot to me, and I respect that greatly. And as we got to know each other a little bit better through conversation, his background and some of his previous training started to bubble to the surface and came to light. I thought it was pretty impressive. He said, well, just so you know, I've done my background work on you. I know a whole lot about you already before I even talked to you. So that will make a lot more sense here in a moment as we start to talk about Kevin's background and his experience. But anyway, he, as a fairly new, I don't know if I can say the word fairly new deer hunter, Kevin. I mean, you're an outdoorsman, but you really just got into deer hunting pretty recently. And
yeah, over the last couple of years. Yeah,
exactly. And that you were applying some of your formal training and into the realm of deer hunting and land management and sort of the setup and how to navigate across the landscape through a hunter's eyes, but also understanding how the deer utilize the landscape. And I just, within a few minutes of talking about it, we said, man, I got to get you on a podcast. Let's talk about this in front of the public and see if we can't offer some things that people might grasp onto and apply it to where they live and hunt. But Kevin, can you tell us a little bit more, or maybe a lot bit more, as much as you want to, about what you told me as far as your background and how you applied that in the military?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an intelligence analyst by trade. I was an intelligence analyst in the reconnaissance community of the Marine Corps. I did 5 years active duty. I think technically say I was Special Forces for 96 hours. I had orders for 96 hours to help one of the real big boy units. But yeah, I've got a lot of training in looking at new areas, new locations, and leveraging and everything I can collections wise to figure out what's going on in a particular area. And as we kind of dive into that, I do have some visual aids for you so we can kind of make sense of what I'm saying as I'm saying it. But yeah, I did we call it the schoolhouse. My schoolhouse for my job was about 3 months in Virginia Beach. And then I hit the ground running and never looked back. So the interesting thing about my experience is, most military veterans that you talk to over the last 20 years or whatever it's been now, that, they all went to Iraq or Afghanistan, and I didn't have that experience. My deployment was in follow-up response of the attack that happened on the consulate in Benghazi in Libya. So I have a little different understanding and experience of what some deployments can look like, and to give kind of an idea of what my responsibilities were, is I was the sole ground intelligence source for the ground unit of our deployment. And what that entailed is our mission set was immediate response to U.S. embassies in Africa. And my area of operation, which is kind of the catchphrase of where all of our activity is going to be, is if you look at a map of Africa and you find the country Niger, I had to know everything that was going on north of Niger. So it was a pretty big area. When I tell people this, it kind of makes them go, "How did you do it?" My deployment was just shy of 7 months, and I typically worked 16 to 20 hour days, 6 to 7 days a week for that 6 months. So it's a lot of coffee involved.
That one of the first things that jumps out in my mind as far as a question, us, the consumer here in the United States, when we look at the aerial imagery and the satellite imagery that we have access to, one can't help but wonder that you had access to way better technology and way more current events as they were unfolding that to your access.
Yeah, so I had we have so in the military, you've got multiple tiers of units. You've got division, which is the very biggest unit, and they're kind of strategically mindset. It is, it's kind of the way that that I explain it is, let's use Indianapolis as an example. So at the division level, they want to know generally what's happening in Indianapolis. In the regiment size, which is the next level below division, they want to know what's happening on the west side of Indianapolis. So take, the circle of 465, cut it in half. They want to know what's going on in this half. Then you've got the battalion, and that's the next level lower. And that's kind of the main units that get plugged around different places. So like with the Marine Corps, if you hear 28, 16, 13, those are battalions. And so what they would be concerned about is what's happening in Southwest Indianapolis. And so the smaller each unit gets, the smaller your scope gets on what you're looking at. So mine was even lower than that. I got down to the platoon level. So I needed to know my guys were starting at Keystone Avenue and they're going to 86th Street. What are they going to run into on the way, while they're conducting missions, and out of there? So it was very, very detail oriented.
What branch of the military were you in, Kevin?
I was Marine Corps.
Okay. My dad was in the Army, and he was part of the 1st Infantry Division. And I was just looking up in my phone here to see which battalion he was in. I was just
Yep,
curious.
and that's one. Yeah, that's one of the differences. So the Army has different naming conventions than the Marine Corps does.
Gotcha.
So like for me, I was part of 2nd Reconnaissance Battalion, 2nd Marine Corps Division. So the division is all in one base, and then there's a bunch of different, you had 2nd Infantry Battalion, 8th Infantry Battalion, things like that. And from what I've seen, the Army tends to have like 101st Battalion, 82nd Battalion, and I have no idea how their naming conventions work.
Yeah. I was just looking right here. It says, what does it say? Where's it at? Company A, 2D, Battalion 16th Infantry. I don't know what that means, but that's what my dad was.
Yep. So with that breakdown, you've got division and then regiments, and I'm at least in the Marine Corps, we have 3 regiments per division, 3 battalions per regiment, 3 companies per battalion. So it's the real big trickle finger down system. So that was what company he was in, of what battalion he was in, probably of what division he was in.
Yeah, I know for sure it was the big red one, 1st Infantry Division. And I wasn't sure what else was behind that. So anyway, Kevin or Tom, continue on. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Well, a little side thing that just popped in my head as you guys were talking about that, exactly the naming conventions. Everybody hears about SEAL Team 6. Does that mean there's a SEAL Team 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Or is because everybody talks about SEAL Team 6 because they're the elite of the elite, right? But
right, yeah. So SEAL Team 6. Go ahead.
No, is that a stupid question? I mean,
no, not at all. So from my understanding, SEAL Team 6 they go after the Bin Ladens of the world. That is their specialty. But there are other unit designators within the Navy for the SEALs that they have. They're all special forces, and let me tell you, with working with some SEALs, those dudes you don't want to mess with them. And we, in fact, so on the base where my schoolhouse was, on our side of the base, you had all the intel guys training, and then on the other side of the base, you had SEAL training. And they told us, make sure you don't get too close over there. They'll roll you up.
The events around the Benghazi fiasco made a lot of headlines here in the States. And obviously there was a movie made about it afterwards. And at the frustration of a lot of American citizens. So what happened over there? Your involvement, was it as things were starting to percolate over there, or was it after the fact of the actual that battle that took place there? What happened there?
Yeah, so that the attack itself happened September 1st of 2012. I got there May of 2013. And so we were the follow-up to make sure that didn't happen again. Basically, it was a situation where too many things went wrong, and we basically, with the losses that we had in conjunction to that attack, the government decided we can't let that happen again. And so my group was the first iteration of being staged in Southern Europe to do immediate response should something like that happen again. And because of that, one of the things with my job is I had top secret clearance. So I had all the information that I needed, and so that we understood what happened with that event so that we could help prevent it in the future.
I don't know, that makes me, I just have so much respect. And as just a common citizen here in the country, you lay your head on your pillow at night and can sleep well because you just know that we have one badass government of military professionals, people that know what's going on around the world at every given second of the day, all day long. And we're the best of the best. And it's enticing to want to know more, but I know there's a wall there. We can't know more.
Yeah. And unfortunately it's been, so obviously that deployment was 2013. So we're looking at, 10 years since I had done that. And I'm kind of in that cloudy spot of what I can and can't say. So I kind of just say the general, but everything I pretty much talk about, you can find on Google. So anything I mention, related to Benghazi or related to what I call tradecraft of intel work, you can find on Google. So no, I'm not telling you any secret sauce, so to speak, but
come on, Kev.
But it's stuff that not everybody knows about.
No, I think it's fascinating no matter what. And most people, I would believe it's safe to say, don't take the time to search the stuff out to find out what truly is released to like unclassified information or however you want to call it. But
well, and that's talking about seeking information out. That's one of the things that has actually freaked my mom out a couple times. Is my mom's a financial crimes investigator, and she was trying to find something about some foreign entity or whatever she was looking for and couldn't find it. And I asked her what it was, and 10 minutes later, I had all the information she was looking for. And part of the training that I got was how to dive through the Google indexing and take away all the SEO stuff that the companies do to put their names higher up in that search bank. I know how to go through and kind of beat some of that to find exactly what I'm looking for.
Hopefully when you were doing your background on me, you didn't find any compromising photographs or anything.
We'll talk later.
That's great.
I don't even want to know what you found on me, Kevin. I'm scared.
Well, inquiring minds want to know. Obviously, you can only say so much, but walk us through a day in your life as an intelligence gathering person with what you have access to at your fingertips. You could probably look at my yard and know if I was cutting my grass, obviously, or something like that. But I would just love to hear what you can tell us there, just because it fascinates me, and I just think the technology is really intriguing.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and flip over to my little presentation here.
Nice.
And we'll kind of talk through some of that. Well, let me go back to just kind of day in the life. So kind of my everyday routine was we had unit formation in the morning to make sure everyone was there and safe and where they needed to be and all that. Then I would go in and start the process of weeding through emails. One of the things that I had was through our different reporting channels, we had a software that I could tell it, I want every report generated by this organization on this person with their name spelled this way. So I had all these different keywords or phrases or things like that. And it wouldn't be uncommon to come in every morning with 1,500 emails. So it was weeding through what exactly I wanted, and that all depended on what we were looking at the time. So that was kind of my everyday thing, was keeping situational awareness on, for base camp, knowing, okay, here's who leads base camp. Here's who their financing is. Here's who their worker bees are. Here, we call it knowing who's who in the zoo is the phrase that we use. And so figuring out all of that information and keeping files or database type things of all these different groups. And so just kind of always maintaining awareness. And then depending on what training, I call them my trigger pullers, my actual boots on the ground guys, whatever training they were doing, I would supplement whatever information they needed for training. So like if they were going to do a hostage recovery type situation, I would create a scenario for them with different players and give them the pictures that they need to get positive ID on who the bad guy is, and things like that. The one big thing that I had every week was we had a commander's brief once a week, and the battalion commander had the heads of each department. So you had an admin department, intel, supply, motor T, ops, everything that makes the unit run. And basically what my part of that brief was every week is if the battalion commander had a specific question about something he had read about, I get him the more deeper information about it. Or if there's some, wild incident that happened, I would brief him on, hey, this happened. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is what I'm about to go follow up on, that kind of thing. So it was very important to know not just what was happening in the classified world, but what was happening in your nightly news. And that was a conversation I had pretty regularly with my parents is, what are you hearing about on the news with this? Because sometimes guys watch the news, or platoon leaders watch the news, and they're like, hey, what are they talking about here? And I had to know that. And it really, the biggest part of my job was information gathering and processing, because you kind of look to your intel guy of, hey, I can go ask him whatever question about what's going on in one of the hot zones, and he's going to know. So it was my job to know.
Kicks, hope you don't mind me because my mind's going 100 miles an hour. So
jump right in here, Tom. I'm just listening, man. I'm enjoying this conversation, honestly.
You can cut my mic off at some point to get a word in edgewise. So
No, you're fine. Run it.
So, Kevin, you had a really just mentioning about news, the news cycles back home. How often did you find it that what the people back home, your mom and dad, were hearing was completely inaccurate or not the complete dispensement of the news as it was playing out to be?
The total inaccuracy was rare, but it would be either not the whole picture or not. It wasn't like out and out lies, but it wasn't totally there. Now speaking of my mother, she would be very upset with me if I didn't tell her favorite story of my time in the military with the news. So, me being the top secret, all the, analyst, I happened to be in Yuma, Arizona, and I was helping teach infantry officers some basic intel skills and do some training that way. And Mom calls me up and she says, hey, what are you doing right now? Sitting at the bar on base. Why? She goes, do they have TV that's there? Yeah. Have them turn one on. So my mom got to tell her intelligence analyst son that we had gotten bin Laden. So that's she got the scoop on me on that one. So
Is
she
that
was
right?
That's one of her favorite stories, is that she got to tell me that we'd gotten bin Laden.
That's pretty cool. Very cool.
So, but yeah, it's rarely just full on lies. It's a lot of times not being able to give the full picture because of the sensitive nature of the information, or it's, if all three of us saw the same exact car wreck, we're all going to describe that car wreck differently.
Sure.
So you get a lot of that too.
Absolutely. Perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kevin, I got a question.
Hit me.
You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but did they really throw his ass in the ocean? I'm just curious.
Yep. That was for, so that his body did not become a like a, this is
Shrine.
maybe a little over exaggerated, but yeah, like a thing of worship or thing of dedication to that was how that was handled.
Well, do you mind sharing that little visual that you got with you to show us?
Yeah. So does that show up well enough for you guys? Ooh, and I even have a pointer. Look at that. So this is what we call the OODA loop, and it stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And so this is kind of the thought process that we try to do, and this is something that I think a lot of what we're about to talk about is going to be very, very applicable, not only in the hunting world and trying to find that new hunting spot or analyzing how to better your habitat, but I think in the real estate world too, of just thinking about initial things when you're looking at a property. I think there might be some points in this that you'll take either as an agent or as prospective buyer and go, I never thought of that before. So what the OODA loop does is it's this constant process that's happening, and it's the way you think. And so basically what happens is the observe is basically you're making observations. I see that I'm in the woods. There's a ton of trees. I haven't identified what they are, but there's a ton of trees. There's a creek over here, just taking in the initial information. Then the orient is, can be as simple as, well, now I'm facing north in my property. Then the decide is taking everything that we look at in the orient section of figuring out what kinds of trees, what direction the river flows, all that kind of stuff. Everything that you see in the observe and orient period, you put into place in the decide. And that's when you decide, well, the river on the side of the river I'm standing on, there's not going to be any deer here. But if I cross the river, there's a great spot that I can put a hunting cabin and then 15 deer, tree stands and stuff like that. And then the act is going ahead and doing that. And what we try to do as intelligence analysts is I try to get into the head of, I'll call it the enemy, or in our case, for our instances, I get in the head of the deer. And it's having that deer mindset, or in my case, that terrorist mindset. And if I can implant myself somewhere, within this, especially within the orient and decide section of this and the enemy, I can really mess things up for them. So that's kind of our thought process on how we go about thinking through and how we decide what missions will be most effective. So then this is kind of my bread and butter. This is my operational process. It's called the intelligence cycle. And so it starts with planning, direction, needs, and requirement. So in my world, and what I try to do as an analyst is I try to take what can be very complex topics or complex situations and put them in a way that whatever my audience, be it the commandant of the Marine Corps that I briefed or my low-level trigger puller that I briefed, I try to put things in language that they'll understand. So what I'll do through the presentation is I'll talk about how I use it in my intel world, but how it's applicable either in the deer world or the real estate world. So the planning and direction is simply what are we trying to accomplish? What is our overall mission for this battle space? Or what is my overall mission for this property? Do I want to put a house there? Do I want it to be an off-grid cabin that I'm going to use a couple times a year for hunting? Do I even want to put a building there? So those are some of the planning initial ideas that I have about what I'm trying to accomplish. Then the collection phase comes in. And this is where I'll get in a little bit, Tom, on some of the different things you were talking about, imagery and things like that. So the collection world is massive. So you have multiple different disciplines of intelligence. So I was the actual title is intelligence specialist is the name of the job. And so what that means is I take the information from all of these other disciplines, synthesize it into a usable thing for what I'm trying to do. So you've got myself, you've got IMIT, which is imagery intel, and those are the guys that, they'll make maps for us that have topo or whatever symbology that we need on that map to identify. They can do that for us. They can do the satellite imagery. We can do drone imagery, drone video. I cannot tell you how many hours of drone footage I have watched to see what's going on in a village or in a, down a road or something like that. And to go back to that OODA loop, that's one of the exercises sometimes that we'll do as intel guys is we'll find a clip of drone footage, and I'd sit with my junior Marines and say, okay, you see this guy digging on the side of the road. What do you tell the drone pilot to do? Well, I don't know yet. Okay, well, let's observe some more. Let's orient, So that's kind of how this all works together. We had what's called SIGINT, which is signal controls. So listening to other radio communications and some other really James Bond stuff that they can do. So, and then counter intel guys, which are the ones that will go into different places and they'll have their own sources. Those are the guys that those 1,500 reports that I'm reading are while I was in X village, I talked to Tom and he told me this. Like those are the kind of reports that I was reading from our human intelligence guys. So we take all those different avenues of information and collect based on what our planning and our direction is. So then we go into, helps if I put it in the right thing here. There we go. So then we go into process and exploitation, and that's literally just organizing all of that. All that information that we gathered is organizing it and processing it. Then the analysis part, the next section, that's really where the bread and butter comes in of, okay, well, I'm reading this report, or, we'll put it in hunting terms. Okay, it's the beginning of archery season. So we're still pretty warm weather. In our case, it's still kind of raining in that time. Well, I'm going to conduct this hunt in rifle season, which is about 2 months later. Okay, well, is the information that I have about archery season accurate for what I'm about to do? And so that's where some of that analysis comes in, is looking at the historical patterns and looking at what I've got in front of me. Does it make sense? Is this an anomaly? That's a big thing we try to do, is figure out what the anomalies are. And so I think I talked with you, Tom, that, for me this year, it felt like this was kind of a slower harvest season for deer. Well, apparently the NDA disagrees with me, because they just put out with an article. I don't know if you saw that It was like another historic harvest year of mature bucks. So that's the analysis part of it. And another slide or two that I have coming up will show a little bit more some of the tools that I use for that analysis. And then the dissemination piece is literally just giving it to who needs to have it. So in your guys' case as real estate agents, you're going to have a client that says, I want a property that I can hunt on, I can fish on, I don't need to live there 100%, but I want it. Okay, so that's your guys' planning and direction. collection for you guys is going to be looking at all your real estate tools that you have to pull properties that fit X criteria. Your processing and exploitation is going to be, okay, well, I know they want a cabin. They don't want off-grid, so I need power. Okay, I'll remove everything that does not have power access. That's your processing and exploitation. Then your analysis section is that further conversation with your client of what, I've got a couple properties. Tell me exactly what you're looking for. Based on the information that you're given from the client, you analyze of these options, which is going to be the best fit. Then the dissemination process is going to be based on all of our conversations. Here's the 3 properties I think are perfect for you. And then when they give you the feedback on that, this whole process starts again. So the intelligence cycle and the next thing I'm going to show, which is called IPB, they are continuous cycles. So these are, just kind of the basics of how Intel works and how what I did could maybe fall into your world a little bit.
And it's interesting because we, whether we realize it or not, are by default doing those processes. Maybe not everybody's doing them very well, but that same cycle is going on in our day-to-day routines and we don't even really realize it. But the intelligence side of it is you guys have stood back and analyzed each of those subsets and those segments and determined how to better make each one of those almost like a filter system for what goes through it.
Yeah, and it's one of those where, they talk about the different personalities of an alpha guy or a beta guy or whatever. I've heard not that long ago of one called Sigma, which I think is what a lot of Intel guys do, is we kind of sit back, we see what's going on, and then we are very
calculated.
To quote good old Coach Dungy, it's important to respond and not react. And so what we try to do in the Intel world is we respond.
Something that jumped in my mind back into your deployment stuff is that when you are hearing from your human intel, what your eyes are showing you through drone or satellite imagery, oftentimes those things probably don't match each other because you guys are they're trying to throw you off the scent, right? So you have to decipher what is true and what is false, and your eyes don't lie to you, obviously, but I'm sure you get tips and things that are just nothing more designed than to stalemate you or throw you off the trail.
Yep, absolutely. And especially in the Afghan world, is what a lot of times would happen too is because your 6th great uncle wronged my 8th great grandfather in some way, that has stayed within those groups. And so it was, trying to figure, that's the other part of the human intel guy's job, is not only get these sources, but see how reliable and accurate they are. And a lot of times, almost every brief or paper that I would do on something, we have different levels of assessment confidence. And, it's with very high confidence, I assess whatever, or with moderate confidence, I assess whatever. So yeah, it's putting all these pieces together and seeing what does fit, what doesn't, and then understanding, sometimes like that, you get a guy that always tells you the wrong information, but it's the wrong information in a certain direction. And so the literal information is not reliable, but the direction that he's evading is accurate and reliable. So that's all the different pieces of it that you've got to figure out and then try to explain to people.
That's very cool. Yeah. he did it. And he always points his finger at somebody else, but it's usually like 180 pointing back at himself or somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. Fascinating stuff.
So then this is my baby. So this is IPB. This is Intelligence Preparation of the Battlespace. And it's got 4 steps in it, but it's a lot more than just 4 steps. So you could change this into intelligence preparation of the land I'm about to buy. So the 4 steps are: define the battlespace environment, describe the battlespace effects, evaluate the threat, and determine the threat course of action. So define the battlespace environment. That is literally, okay, what are my property lines? You're defining the environment. It's the property lines. Describe the effects. Do I have trees? Do I have a body of water? Do I have a stream? Is it a topo nightmare or topographic nightmare? These are all the different effects of the battle space. Evaluate the threat. In my case, is going to be the different terrorist organizations and cells. And for example, on my deployment, you had Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. So AQIM was the umbrella organization. But then within each country, you had these little splinter groups off of that. So you had to know, all this stuff. So that's the threat, is the knowing who's who in the zoo, or in, the hunting landscape, evaluating the threat. How much deer do I have here? Do I have turkey here? What's the wildlife like? That kind of thing. And then determine the threat's course of action. For me in the intel world, we typically did most likely and most dangerous. So what is the most likely thing the particular enemy I'm looking at is going to do? Or the other thing is, what is the absolute worst case scenario that they could do? So I'll flip that around again in the deer world. That, okay, determine the deer's course of action. What are the deer most likely going to do? The other one, the most dangerous, I would probably say, what's the most random thing that could, or the most unlikely thing, is probably the better way in that world. Is it's like, okay, I've got food plot, water source, bedding. They should be here. Why are they not here? Mm-hmm. So that's that continuous loop. And this is another thing, just like the OODA loop and the intel cycle, there's a little pattern here. It all keeps going. It never stops. So within describing the battle space effects, so I'm sure this looks super confusing. So there's a couple things that we do. And the way that we do this is, if you're doing it old school, it's literally a big map and a bunch of the acetate sheets that you can write with markers. Oh, yeah. Or you do it on PowerPoint and add all the little shapes over a map on PowerPoint. So what you're looking at here, it's called a modified combined obstacle overlay. And what makes it modified is that it's got all these big red arrows in it. Mm-hmm. Without the arrows, it's called a coup, a combined obstacle overlay. So what we're looking at here is these big green blobs are vegetation. And so what I'm going to do as an intel analyst is, okay, what all falls in vegetation? Bushes, grass, flowers, trees, all that. So this tells me that this is an area full of vegetation. Depending on what our mission set is, I'm going to determine what type of vegetation that is. Can I get a bike through that veg? Can I get a Humvee through there? What am I looking at? So there's multiple different layers. Then the next thing is going to be looking at all your surface drainage. So it's hard to see, but there's a little blue line here. There's some more over here. that to the left of the screen here that show pockets of water. And same thing, is this a spring-fed 2-foot stream, or is this a mile-long 20-foot deep lake? And, some of that's pretty obvious by just looking at a map. But, sometimes you'll get a property that you've never been to before, and it's like, okay, there's a pond here. Is it 2 feet deep the whole way across? Is it a big 20-foot cylinder in the ground that's filled up with water? Figuring out all those different pieces. So then the next big thing is obstacles. And this is where you can very quickly get into deer habitat, and what you had done, Tom, with Project 17 is finding obstacles, and obstacles aren't always a negative thing. So obstacles are simply just man-made or nature-made potential obstacles in an area. So for example, a fallen tree would be an example of an obstacle. But does that mean it's a big enough tree? It's an obstacle because I can't get a vehicle through there? Or is it an obstacle that I can't walk through there? Or is it a fence that is a high fence that I'm certainly not jumping over? Or is it a 3-strand tension wire fence that I can squeeze through? So you identify all these things, and then you have follow-on products of what exactly is in all this stuff. So then you get the combined obstacle overlay of putting all those things down into one big sandwich, and you can get a ton of information out of that. So then the next step, which is what these red arrows are the mobility corridors. And so, for example, on this particular map, you've got this pretty wide one that goes right down the middle, and then to the left of that, you've got a narrower one. And these are, let me flip it over so you can see what I'm talking about. So you've got the big red arrow down the middle, and then you've got your smaller arrow here to the left. The size of these arrows literally have to do with the size of force that could go through that. So with this corridor, I could probably bring an entire regiment through at one time. This arrow to the right or to the left, I'm probably bringing a company through there at a time. And so where this translate is this a massive deer highway, a split in the field, or a change in cover line from the bedding to food? Or is it a tiny little trail that they're walking, single file line down? So those are some of the things that I would use to help prepare my guys to go out on missions and give them every bit of information, because they're going to need to know, okay, on the way there, we need to get through all of this. How easy is it going to be? Where, another aspect of this that I forgot to mention, we love our acronyms in the military. We are acronym crazy. And so for this step with the MACU, we do what's called, depending on who you ask, it's either called COCOA or OCOCA. It just depends on how you spell it. But it's key terrain, obstacles, cover concealment, avenues of approach. I think I'm missing a letter in there, but that's what we're looking at. And so let me flip back one more time. So these little circles, these are all key terrain. And so these are spots within this particular area of operation that I want to make sure I control, or I always have eyes on. So in other words, these key terrains are where I want to put my stand, or where I know a building can go that's not going to take away from my hunting activities.
Very, very cool.
So the other thing I've done real quick is just to kind of show some of how I go about doing this. So this is a property, you can kind of see the red outline. This is simply Google Earth. This is something anyone can do on any property that they're looking at getting into. And this is a whole nother conversation that I can get into probably on another day in time, but some of the stuff that consumer drones can do for you with this next process. But so the property line goes from here basically to this river and this whole field. So if I'm looking at this particular property and I'm thinking I might want to buy it, what are some things just from Google Earth that I can do before I set foot on this property in person? I can say, okay, well, we are faced, the top of the screen is north, the bottom of the screen is south. So I know the creek is to my east, the road is to my west. That will also give me an idea of when I'm thinking down the road a little bit. Okay, if I know from being around this area, are you guys able to see my mouse on there very well? So I know that the wind typically comes from the bottom left of the screen, kind of to the middle of the screen. That's the general direction of wind through here. So if I know that, I'm already thinking, okay, if I'm going to turn this ag field into a deer property, I've got some ideas already just based on looking at it and knowing wind direction, some potential locations of tree stands and potential cases of movement. Okay, another big thing that I want to look at is, let me scroll out. So there's our red boundary of the property. I've got a lot of ag, and then I've got a state highway. So I know if I'm going to have and hold deer here, they're most likely going to come from these little pockets around me. So, I mean, there's a lot that way that you can find out just from looking at Google Earth. The other really cool thing that Google Earth does is it does some 3D stuff for you. So you go to the bottom of the screen here and click this 3D. And now, if I zoom in, I can see, let me see if I can remember how to do this here. I can see that I got it to spin the way I wanted to the other day. Yeah. But you can kind of see here, you've got a little bit of a hump here. You've got a little bit of a valley. You can see that you've got power lines. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't see that these power lines you can't see how high up they are, but I'm going to cheat because I know, A, from seeing this stuff, B, having done some imagery training, these are like 50-foot high power lines. So it's not anything that's going to, be an issue for us. So these are some, just some very simple initial things you can do as both an agent and a client when looking at a property, because when you go to, just the over the top view, okay, this is flat ground. You do street view or this 3D view, and all of a sudden you've got an incline like that on the property that you wouldn't have known otherwise. So there's a lot of collection, there's a lot of analysis, and there's a lot of processing that you can do prior to even stepping foot on a property. The one warning is, do not get analysis or do not get paralysis by analysis. Is you can, one of the phrase that we use in the Intel world is don't fall in love with your own product. And what we mean by that is if I have a mission and I'm creating a brief for Major Tom, Well, then before I give my brief to Major Tom, I'm going to have Captain Kix look at it for me and give me feedback. And I need to be willing to accept that feedback. So what that means in like the real estate world as a client, I'm going to look at this property and go, I know it's 50 acres. It's got a creek that I know I can fish in. It's got potential to hold some deer. And there's a home already on it. So it hits a lot of boxes for me. Now I can go talk to Tom or Kix and say, hey, we need to go check this property out. I'm really interested.
Absolutely. Then Kix says, nah, that woods is too small. You need to find something a little bit bigger. And then I would say, well, we can convert that field to woods and warm season grass. Oh, anyway, I'm just messing with you. But
I like my
one
woods.
thing what's impressive is that three-dimensional view has really gotten a lot better since the last time I used it. Those trees look realistic, and you can see the role in the field. Like you said, the topography changes. That's cool to see.
And another thing, not in the Intel world, but OnX Hunt, they have a feature on there now that if there is updated imagery, it will show you can toggle a little switch and it will show you the most recent. And I did that for a public land area that I was hunting in, that I clicked on recent imagery, and all of a sudden the leaf canopy was gone, and it was imagery taken after all the leaves fell, and you can scroll back in time. And so there's just so many things out there collection wise that, I mean, really the biggest, I think the biggest step really is that planning and direction, is figuring out what the ultimate goal is. And then you can go out and collect and use whatever appropriate tools needed to collect. Then I can decide, okay, here's what I found. What does all this mean? And, I'll give you one more kind of Intel cliche saying, whatever you want to call it, is there's a big difference between information and intelligence. That I can tell you that I'm wearing a white button down. That's information. Until you understand that when I wear a white button down, it means I'm about to go have a steak dinner. Okay, well, if you observe me for a while and you see me wear no white shirts for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden you see me in a white shirt, he's going to go get steak. Those are some of the things, the information does not become intelligence until there is data and analysis to it.
Very, very interesting. Well, this has been nothing short of impressive, man. And I feel like we're barely scratching the surface how we can apply this to real estate and hunting. But we've set the stage here, and you've done a fantastic job of laying out the processes of what gets, what makes your mind work in those ways, and how you can analyze what you're seeing. So if you don't mind, Kix, I think you would be happy to agree with me that we need to have Kevin back again, and maybe multiple times over the, in the future to talk. Let's apply this to maybe a specific farm or something, or as we project, a new property that just gets purchased, and the client wants to, now let's take it to the next level, to analyze it through your processes and see how that would combine with or contrast with just throwing darts at the wall and seeing what works and what doesn't, going into it with a goal and a mindset. And
to plug your video series again, Project 17, you did all this. You maybe didn't know the names or, the title, but you've done this process. But now that you've maybe got some words associated to it, some processes associated to it, I mean, that just makes you a better outdoorsman. It makes you a better property owner. It makes you a better property seller, makes you a better agent, all the above.
I was going to say,
Fantastic.
I've been a business owner for the last 9 years. you could apply that to anything. Especially like being an entrepreneur or business owner or whatever.
Yep. And I mean, when you think about what this Intel process is used for, I would use this same process to look into somewhere like Afghanistan as I would Vietnam. So very, very different environments, places, culture, all that stuff. I'm still going to use this same process. And in fact, that was something that I was actually very fortunate is with my mom's career of being a financial crimes analyst. A lot of the processes that she did for her work were similar to what I did. And so it allowed me to translate my skill set as a military intelligence into, please forgive the word, but civilian terms in ways that people that don't have that background can understand what the heck I'm talking about.
Sure. No, there's no offense there. That makes total sense to me.
Kevin, how long did you serve in the Marine Corps?
I served 5 years. I was in from 2010 to 2015.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Yep. I don't know how it worked and how they decided this, but I live in Indiana. We have 2 boot camps. We've got one in South Carolina, Parris Island, the one that, all the, Full Metal Jacket everyone knows about. And then we've got San Diego. And I went to boot camp in San Diego. Figure that out.
Sounds about
Probably
right.
just drew straws or rolled dice, one or the other, huh?
Yep. Well, and so the process is you go to boot camp, and then if you are non-infantry, you go to what's called Marine Combat Training. And it basically teaches you basic infantry tactics, different weapon systems, all that kind of stuff, because the philosophy in the Marine Corps is that every Marine's a rifleman. So me as an intel guy or a supply guy, if need be, if the proverbial stuff really hit the fan, they could get thrown into an infantry unit and not be totally lost. So I did both of those in California, and then my schoolhouse for my job was in Virginia. The funny thing for me, and we talk about how sometimes it's the cheapest option, or sometimes things just don't always understand why they work the way they do sometimes with government. But I think my favorite one was when I flew back out to California for MCT. I went from Indy to Atlanta, from Atlanta to California. So they took me southeast to go west.
Maybe they were throwing somebody off your scent,
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I never joined the military, but I have a lot of respect for you guys, and I appreciate your service very much.
Well, and I appreciate you guys saying that. And the thing that, I always say is you don't always have to necessarily agree with the war or the conflict, but don't forget the person fighting it. I mean, this is a whole nother topic that we could spend hours talking about, but I think sometimes a lot of times we don't take great care of our veterans. And so don't forget the guys that were there. You don't have to support the war, but please support the war fighter.
100%.
Well said.
Well, Kevin, before we let you go, man, we got a little bit of more to talk about here. We have a segment we like to call our quick draw questions.
Okay.
Basically, I'm going to ask you about 15 to 20 questions, and you just answer them. Put as much detail in as you want, as little detail in as you want. I don't care. Just want to hear the answers. So,
all right, let's go.
Ready for that?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. First question: favorite camo brand?
The one I like the look the best of is First Light. The one I buy is the cheapest.
Great answer. Next question: crossbow or compound bow?
compound, Matthews. Yep, I just at the end of 2024, I picked up the Matthews lift, and I love it. It is the quietest bow I have ever been around.
Yeah, good bow. I know they had some troubles with them there first, but
I'm still shooting a Matthews Triax, which is probably about 8 or 10 years old right now, but it still absolutely shoots darts.
next question. What is your favorite bow sight?
Currently, the one that Matthews had, the one that fits inside the frame, it's just nice tucked in, and the pins have that rotating cover over the fiber optic for the pins. So if you're in a super bright or super dark environment, you can adjust so that it fits the environment.
Nice.
Nice.
Yep, I forget what that's called, but I know what you're talking about. What's your favorite broadhead?
2-blade mechanicals. The brand doesn't necessarily always matter, but I like 2-blade mechanicals that kind of create a sharper, I like a little sharper angle on it than a flatter angle.
And get a little better penetration that way. Go to rifle caliber.
For Indiana, here you go. For Indiana private, 308. For Indiana public, 12 gauge slug. When I go up to my Marine buddies in Wisconsin, this year I took my 300 Win Mag.
Nice.
Power to match your surroundings.
Yep, absolutely.
What's your favorite rifle brand?
That's hard because I've got several. I guess I'll go with Browning. My 300 Win Mag is the Browning X Bolt, and it is super stable for a 300 Win Mag. I think it has less kick than my M4 platform. It's solid.
Awesome. Favorite hunting app?
Onyx.
Favorite rifle optics?
Vortex.
Tree stand,
I've
saddle, or
got
blind?
Vortex on everything. If I'm on my own in public land, I take the blind. Part of that is I have some nerve issues in my leg from a military injury, and I don't necessarily want to get halfway up to the tree stand and my nerves decide they're done, or be 20 foot up in a tree and halfway down and they say, I don't know. But when I went out to Wisconsin, my buddy had a nice ladder stand, so I didn't have to, shimmy or really hug the tree climbing it. So I guess the long answer short, whatever is stable.
Perfect. A little tougher question here. Favorite food plot brand or product?
Whatever brings them in. I personally haven't planted food plots. I don't have. I live out in the country, but I only have about an acre, so I don't have a real good private spot myself. But one of my friends has a couple farms, and they plant some turnip food plots, and those always seem to bring them in. So we'll go with turnips.
Favorite social media platform?
None of the above.
Perfect. Love that answer. And last and final question, man, it's a question I like to ask everybody just to get your thoughts and opinions on it. If you could give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
You're not an imposter. Do it. Don't have imposter syndrome. If you want it, go after it. Forget what other people think.
Awesome, brother. Well, that's all the quick draw questions I got for you, man. Good job.
Fantastic. Is there anything else I can answer quickly off of what we initially talked about for you guys today, or?
Not off the top of my head. I'm sure we will have some afterthoughts that will be great fodder for the next time we get together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on, man. We'll go into maybe some further detail or, something, and we'll definitely have you back on here for sure.
Yeah, sounds good. I look forward to it.
Tom, you got any final thoughts?
No, I want to thank Kevin so much for not knowing each other for very long. I think we've forged down a nice relationship path here. We're look forward to being buddies and possibly even associates at some level of work at some point in the future. We've already discussed some opportunities there potentially. So we'll see how that all goes, but looking forward to getting you plugged in with the local chapter and being involved in our field day event this year and just getting to know each other a little bit better.
Kevin, final thought?
And thank you guys for having me on. I love talking about this stuff. One of the things that I try to do is I always stay curious, and I think it's so important to bring in different perspectives or different professionals on different topics, and I think this is a great thing you guys have going. That who in the world would have thought intel work would have anything to do with real estate or that kind of thing. So I really appreciate your guys' time and appreciate the invite.
Awesome. We've enjoyed it.
Well, Kevin, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate you doing that. It means a lot to us. We'll definitely have you back on for another episode. Guys, get a hold of Kevin if you got any questions. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them for you. Don't forget to follow Basecamp Country Real Estate on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, you name it, YouTube. We're out there. Search Basecamp Country Real Estate and you'll find us. Don't forget, at Basecamp Country, it's more than just dirt. It's a lifestyle. We'll see you guys next week right here on the Basecamp Country podcast. Guys, thank you very much.